Wherever you're listening in the world, it's a pleasure to welcome you to IsraelCast, the podcast powered by Jewish National Fund USA, your voice in Israel. I'm Steven Shalowitz, first reminding you that for more than 120 years, Jewish National Fund USA has been the premier philanthropic movement for the land and people of Israel. While best known for planting trees in Israel, JNF USA contributes to Israeli life in so many ways, including community development in the Negev and the Galilee, preservation of heritage sites, supporting people with disabilities, and connecting high school and college students to Israel. To learn more and to see how you can contribute, visit jnf.org. Once again, jnf.org. Hope you got that. All right, as for this episode, what an absolute honor it is to welcome Birthright Israel Foundation's president and CEO, Israel Tapoohi, to the program. Known to his friends as Izzy, he joined the organization in December 2016 after serving in the same capacity at Israel Bonds since October 2011. And we should add that under Izzy's leadership, Israel Bonds U.S. domestic sales increased from $600 million per year, that's $600 million per year, to more than $1 billion with a B, dollars per year. Izzy has had a remarkable career in senior positions in Israel's public and private sectors, which we'll be touching on a little bit later on in our conversation. But for now, it's all about Birthright, as Izzy Tapoohi joins us now via Zoom from Birthright's headquarters just across town here in New York City. Welcome to IsraelCast, Izzy.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be together with you. And I hope we'll be able to plow through Birthright and learn a lot more about it as we go forward.
All right, that's the aim of our conversation, and I'm sure we will, Izzy. Now, listen, we have a very global audience. So for those that might not be familiar with Birthright at the get-go, do share the mandate and the mission of the organization, and what does Birthright really hope to accomplish?
Yeah, so Birthright Israel is an educational trip that ensures that every eligible young Jewish adult around the world, especially the less connected, is given the opportunity to visit Israel. Now, we aim to ensure a vibrant future for the Jewish people, and that is by strengthening Jewish identity, Jewish communities, and connection with Israel. And the reason why I stressed before, especially the less connected, is we feel that they are the ones that need this Jewish identity and Jewish community and connection with Israel more than anyone else. And I would say around 70% to 75% of the young adults that we take to Israel are the less connected.
And then talk about their level of Judaism and what you see in terms of the scope of their Jewish engagement, because one parent, for example, might be Jewish and the other parent might not be Jewish, and those kids still qualify for Birthright, as I understand it.
Exactly. So we have always felt, we've been going by the Ben Gurion approach where, as long as one parent are Jewish, we feel that there are people that ought to be taken to Israel and given the chance of learning what it's all about. And yes, at the end of the day, when you look at their commitment to Judaism and to Israel, I would say the majority of the 70% that I mentioned to you wouldn't have a clue either what Judaism is all about. They know nothing about Purim, they know nothing about Hanukkah, they know nothing of the Jewish holidays, and they certainly know nothing about Israel or its history. So there's no doubt that by taking them there, we make an enormous impact on each one of them.
It's a bit of a sad commentary when I hear that, because these are kids. Talk about the age bracket that we're talking about here.
We're talking about 18 to 26. Mm-hmm. We have been experimenting with 27 to 32, but the basic core is 18 to 26. Now, remember that the majority of these kids don't go to Jewish day schools. With a bit of luck, they might have a bar mitzvah that they learn a couple of months before and, have some kind of a ceremony. Most of it is a nice, good party, nothing to do with the religious aspect of it. So at the end of the day, their involvement in Judaism and in Israel is almost non-existent. And we shouldn't forget that. So they're really coming fresh off the plane. But once they put the foot on the grounds of Ben Gurion, it's just amazing with the transformation. And I assume later on we'll be talking in more details about it.
Yes, indeed we will. Can you take a really big step back, Izzy? When and how did Birthright come into being? Who were the people that initiated it? How did it get off the ground? Because this is an enormous, enormous undertaking.
Yes. So basically, Birthright Israel was founded in 1999 by Charles Bronfman and Michael Steinhardt. And it was, with a remarkable group of committed Jewish philanthropists. You had Ben Schusterman involved, the Gelderman, Sandbergs, a number, amongst many others as well. And it began as a very bold idea. As a matter of fact, some people thought it was a crazy idea that, all of a sudden you would take 18 to 26-year-olds and take them to Israel and transform them and transform the Jewish future. And if you think about it, you remember, I wasn't living in the United States then, but I think that around that time, there was a noticeable effect, a burst, an increase in intermarriage in the United States, and also a loss of the Jewish young kids that tended to drift away from Judaism and from their support for the state of Israel. So that is something that they were thinking about. And they said, how do we do it in a way that's going to be effective? So they thought about it and said, the best thing is to give it as a gift from one generation to the next. So in other words, the older generation, the generation that were already very immersed and deeply involved with Judaism and Israel, would be giving to the next generation a gift. Now, you have to remember that young adults at the age that we're talking about usually travel with their parents when they're a bit younger, or with the schools if they go to Jewish schools, but otherwise they don't necessarily travel at all. And that their decision of, once they are old enough to go, the decision where to go is not necessarily to Israel. There's so many more attractive places to go to. You go to France, you go to Italy, and you have some good spaghetti there, and you go to many, many other places where you enjoy, where you hear that your friends are all going. So they're thinking, when they set it up, was, hang on for a second, how are we also going to be able to attract them to ensure that they come to Israel first? So the whole idea was, that was the idea of giving a gift. A lot of people say to me, Izzy, but many of these young adults, their parents can afford to, to give you and pay for the trip. Why do you need to give them a gift? Now, first of all, many of them that come, if they do well as they get older, they step up and become donors of us. The parents give us also as donor come what may. But when you level the playing field and you offer them a free trip to Israel, even the person that says, I'd like to go to Greece, France, Italy, they will first go to Israel, fall in love with Israel, and then do the rest of it. I can tell you literally of dozens of stories, including one that you see on our website with Erin Schroeder. She was planning to go, as she said, she was milking rich Jews with the idea of going to the Middle East and to Greece and everywhere else, and ended up being dropped off in Israel and fell in love with the place.
Right.
She still went to Greece and everywhere else, but now she's a committed, Jewish adult that is involved with Israel, supports the state of Israel, involved in Judaism. It's just terrific to see all of that. So I think the thinking was tremendous. It was correct. It was the right way to do it. And we will continue to do it because we know that the choice is tremendous today for people, being able to go to so many attractive places, that we want to make sure that they put their foot first in Israel, see what it's all about, fall in love with the place, and then go everywhere else. We're more than happy with that afterwards.
Right. You do have some wonderful alum stories on the Birthright website, which we're going to get to in just a sec, including Erin's. I want to read a quote from hers in just a moment. Talk about then the name. I just want to go through a few logistics here before we move on. So Izzy, then talk about the name Birthright. Very clever name, and it really tells what it is that you're offering. There's truth in advertising, as we say.
Yeah, that's right. Now, listen, I'll be honest with you. I wasn't here in 99, 2000. So I'll give all the credit to the people that thought about it. So Birthright was basically, it came from the idea of birthright, that every Jewish person has a birthright to visit the land of Israel. Listen, at the end of the day, as I always say, 3,000 years ago, there used to be a guy by the name of Abram. I think that I'm related to him somewhere along the line. I mean, it's 3,000 years, and I assume if I dig, into all of the kind of, various sites that you've got on the social media, you probably can find some kind of connection. But listen, I'm related to the guy.
That's why there's 23 in me, by the way.
Yeah, exactly. And at the end of the day, I say to myself always that, listen, it might be 3,000 years ago, but I and my ancestors were kicked out of the land of Israel. We are not, the invaders. We are the indigenous population. We are the aboriginals of the Middle East. We were there from the word go. We were kicked out by the colonialists, by the Assyrians, by the Romans and everyone else. And we now live outside of Israel, but we've got the birthright of actually going there and seeing our homeland and visiting and seeing our people. So the word birthright suited it, and it made a lot of sense. In Israel, it's called taglit. Taglit is discovery, because birthright would have not fitted. You talk about marketing, you're 100% correct. I come from business, and in every country you have to change a little bit. Taglit is discovery, and that is exactly what the program is. Discover your history, your homeland, and yourself.
Right. And so, as we mentioned just a moment ago, or as you mentioned actually, is that the kids are, I call them kids actually, the participants minimum of 18 years of age, 18 to 26, you're now experimenting up to 32 years of age. And again, they come from across the world, don't they?
Yeah. They come from all over the world. We have brought young adults from 68 countries. But I would say somewhere in the vicinity of 75 to 80% are from the United States. Well, you also know it's the largest Jewish community outside of Israel. So there's no doubts about that. But from 68 countries, it's tremendous, because at the end of the day, when they meet up in Israel, you're not only meeting up with friends from the United States, but you're in effect meeting up with friends from all over the world. And by the way, within the United States too, you can come with a campus together. You can come with an area that you are living in and where you've got friends, but you can also go on a national bus, which might end up to put people, young adults from New York, together with people in Los Angeles, San Francisco, Chicago. So that's also a tremendous way of meeting other people, meeting other Jews that have got similar interests. And that in itself is also a melting pot, for all of the young Jews that are coming in from all over the world.
Izzy, that's a really nice jumping off point to another subject that I wanted to bring up, because we should share with our listeners that Birthright has different organizations that run their programs, such as Shor Hashim, which runs the Jewish National Fund Birthright trips. They all seem to have different personalities. I understand Shor Hashim has IDF soldiers with them for the entire trip. Some have a more religious flavor, some a more secular flavor. There are even trips for those with special needs. So where can people go to find out about all these different types of opportunities and these different types of trips?
Yeah, so let me just give you, first of all, you go to the Taglit website. Taglit is the one in Israel, and because they're the one that are running, the whole organization, from a point of view of the travel aspect of it,
Right.
And so Birthright is, I would say, the right word would be outsourced to 9 individual tour organizers. Okay. You've got Shor Hashim, you've got Hillel, you've got Mayanot, you've got OU, and each one of them are accredited to run our trips. Now, each one of them, of course, have got a unique set of interest, but all trips include the core educational component set forth by Birthright. So in other words, even if we outsource, so with every outsourcing that you see today, any businesses as well, they have to ensure that they abide by our core educational component. Very important. We've got a very strong educational committee that looks at it every couple of months, change if need be. Now, while Shor Hashim, like you said, for example, has what we call mifgashim, it's mifgash between Israeli soldiers and the participants, have them for the full 10 days. Every single Birthright Israel group has a mifgash for at least half the trip. So it varies between Shor Hashim, which is 10 days, to some of the others that are also 10 days, by the way, but it goes down to a minimum of 5 days. There's no less than 5 days where you do that. And the reason for that is because we generally believe that the way for our young adults, participants, when they come to Israel, to really understand and get involved in the Israeli society is by actually being together with peers of their age group. And specifically, since all of the Israelis are going to the army, to meet with army soldiers. It's been tremendous. The friendship is just unbelievable. Now, Birthright, of course, offers the classical program that you got for the moment. You got it for 7 or 10 days. 7, we do it for people that have already graduated and might end up wanting a shorter trip because they're now starting to work and they don't have the time, to 10 days. But, we've got many, many programs there. We've got culinary, we've got LGBTQ, we've got arts, lacrosse, photography, and then as well, we've got a lot of accessibility options, including, because we don't want to let any participant not come to Israel, any Jewish kids. So we have got No Limits in Motion, ASL, Yachad, Asperberg, and recovery. So all of those people that have accessibility needs can all come, and they all do come. And that's tremendous. That's a very good feeling that we have, that, we're allowing everyone the possibility of coming and seeing Israel, with their own eyes.
Right. So there are these individual programs. So you just referenced culinary, for example. So
Yeah,
presumably
exactly.
they're meeting chefs, they're going to people's homes and cooking, they're farm to table, they're doing all that.
Yes.
But they are still going to be actively involved in core Birthright exercises, right? There are some things that every group ticks off.
100% correct. So they will go to Yad Vashem, they will go to Herzl, they will go up to up north, they will go to an army base, they will have soldiers with them as well. Mm-hmm. And so, at the end of the day, yes, there's core that they do, there's an educational component that they get involved in, but then within the additional time that they've got, let's say out of the 10 days, 5-6 days, they specialize in whatever they wanted to do. Mm-hmm. And, preferred. So, if they prefer arts, we will concentrate much more on the side of arts. Archaeology, we've had in the past too. We'll probably bring that back again. So we will give them a couple of days of, getting involved in archaeology. I mean, at the end of the day, when you hear all of that, you're probably dying to go yourself.
I was just going to say, you can see me smiling here. Our podcast listeners can't see me smiling because we're not on video for them, but certainly our video folks can see us, because I wish that I could sort of like turn back the clock there, Izzy, and go myself, because it's really a remarkable program. When I told somebody that I was going to be having this conversation with you, and they pointed out that, to the best of their knowledge, the programs are 10 days. You just pointed out some are 7 days.
Yeah, there's a summer 7.
Yes, 7, and that makes perfect sense for those that are already working. And then someone said, "Gosh, is 10 days really enough?" But at the end of the day, Israel is so vast that you could spend a year or two. And how as one of my former bosses used to like to say, how long is a piece of string? It can only go as long as it can go, but you feel that 10 days is about right. Yeah.
Now, so let me tell you this, the 10 days is about right for the participants that we're taking, young adults that are seeking to get that infusion about what Judaism in Israel is all about. It's interesting how you bring that up. It is at the level of being, for the moment, we're doing a due diligence on it, but we are merging with Onward. Onward is a 4 to 8 weeks, it could even be extended to 12 weeks, internship program, where they go to Israel and they spend a much longer period. And we realized, as we looked at Onward and Onward looked at us, that the right combination would be to have the birthright aspect of 10 days and add on an aspect that is a longer period where any participant that's interested in learning in more depth what Israel is all about, the conflict, Judaism, and come back and become a leader in the Jewish community in the United States, that we need another part which will give them a more full and deeper understanding of all of the issues and complexities. So we are most likely, sometimes on the 1st of November, we're combining with with Onward. The Onward has had about 10, 11,000 young adults that they're taking because it's a longer trip and everything. And we're hoping to grow that significantly. And the interesting part is many participants that come on Birthright end up continuing on Onward or come back for a year and then have had the taste of what Israel, Judaism, and everything else is all about and say, you know what, I want to understand it a little bit more in depth. Let me go on to Onward. And we take them gladly. So, I think that's answers some of the issues that you're bringing up. But I think for the majority, for 80%, that 10 days gives them the spark to later on come back and get involved in the Jewish community.
That's brilliant. So as you said, you've had young adults come from 68 countries, and it's my understanding that over the years there's been more than 750,000 folks that have gone on Birthright trips, participated on these trips. So please correct me if I'm wrong there. And I really want to encourage all of our listeners to go to birthrightisrael.foundation. So once again, it's birthrightisrael.foundation. And under the stories tab, they can look at the alum stories that you have there. And I want to share two, and I want you to respond to each one of them, because you just talked about just a moment ago, Erin Schroed. And I want you to talk a little bit more about her, but I want to read just very briefly her quote on the website, which she wrote here, and quote, this is from Erin Schroed, who was a 2010 Birthright Israel alumna. Then the soldiers, she writes, came and met us, and they didn't fit the image that I had of soldiers in my head. They were teenagers, 20-somethings like us in jeans and t-shirts. We spent hours talking, and there were so many similarities between a 21-year-old girl in Israel and a 19-year-old girl in America that we were only discovering because we were put together in a hotel room one night. And Izzy says,
Erin Schroed is a tremendous example of the kind of transformation that takes place when these young participants come to Israel and specifically meet up with the Mifgash, with the soldiers, because the soldiers at the end of the day are Israeli citizens that have been trusted into becoming soldiers, defending the state of Israel. They're young, they're her age group, and all of a sudden she sees a completely different picture of them as against what she's been reading on social media and everything else about these barbaric soldiers, and so it certainly gives her a completely different dimension of what it's all about. Now, Erin is exactly the person that I mentioned before that said, I'm milking rich Jews to get to Israel because my intention is not to get to Israel. I always planned to go to the Middle East. I wanted to go to Jordan. I wanted to go to Egypt. And then I was thinking about from there that I'll jump across to Greece and Italy and Spain and go around Europe and have a good time. She had no interest, not in Israel and not in Judaism. And because we made it a gift or a free trip, she decided to take it. And she says it outright, that my aim was, okay, so I'll get to Israel there, we'll spend a couple of days there. Probably they'll give me a siddur, a prayer book, and I'll be praying from morning to night, because that's the impression you have. If you ask anyone about what is the Middle East, what Israel is all about, they'll tell you desert, extremists, always strive, always fighting. She said to herself, you know what, okay, so I'll sit there in some safe place, and then I'll keep on traveling. She got to Israel straight away. She says, when she landed in Ben Gurion, she got that punch in the stomach. She says it a bit differently. But I'm telling you that that's exactly how they feel. And I always said to myself, what is it that makes a young Jewish adult coming to Israel and feeling that particular punch in the stomach? Now, if we're believers, we say it must be God up there. There's something there that the minute you put your foot down, makes you fall in love. They always say to you, all of them, it changed my life. I would say out of the 100% that we take, 95% say to you, it changed my life. It was a life-changing trip. She got there to Israel. She realized that at the end of the day, they are like her, all of these soldiers. She became friendly with all of them. And today, and she's in touch with every one of them. They talk to each other. They write to each other. I think if you listen to that video, you'll see that her best friend that she made in the army, when she came to try to get funds for a startup, who did she approach? But Aaron, because it's natural, they're friends. And today when you read many a times in American Jewish newspapers that there's a schism between Israel and American Jewry, that is not correct. It might be at the leadership level. At the level down below, we have seen that 750,000 young Jewish adults are interacting with each other fabulously. They love each other, they understand each other's issues, they understand each other's problems, and that's why we need to continue to do that. And in a minute, when we talk a little bit of what's happening today in the American scene, I think I want to stress that particular point as well, the importance of it.
Absolutely. And we should mention that Aaron actually ran for office in the state of California and was faced with a lot of anti-Semitism, but she, of course, was able to counter that because of her experiences in Israel and having gone on Birthright.
It was very nasty, kite, go home, you name it, everything that you can think of. But as she always says, the fact that she managed to get to Israel on Birthright, fell in love with the place, went there many a times, allowed her to be able to stand strong as a proud Jew and a supporter of Israel and defend the Israeli position without any problem whatsoever.
Right. Just one more story, and then I want you to respond, comes from Brooke, 2018 Birthright Israel alumni. She wrote here, quote, "I went in thinking I was Jewish because my parents are Jewish and I identified as Jewish, kind of." That's coming from her. And then you go and you're at the wall and there's this palpable energy. Judaism and the thousands of years of history, both of the people and of the religion, are around you and you can feel it. And that goes to what you were saying when people even just landed Ben Gurion, let alone going to the wall and going to Jerusalem.
So Brooke came from a family that was, a little bit Jewish minded. But if you hear her in more detail, you realize that after her, she didn't even do a bat mitzvah, but after a certain number of years, she just floated away from it. There was really no continuity. She comes on that trip. And as she says, I love that move that she does it to her heart, whoever is going to see that. Why Jewish? Why Jewishness? Why Jew? I'm a Jew. I'm a proud Jew. And it's just amazing how she totally changed. And, when you look and when you listen to her, and I really encourage all of the listeners of this program to get in there because you're going to get some phenomenal stories.
Right. It's Birthright Israel Foundation, and then go to stories, and then you can navigate there to see both Brooke and Aaron's stories and so many others. And by the way, the videos are absolutely beautiful there. It makes,
thank you very much.
Listen, I want to tell you, Izzy, after that, I thought once COVID is over, I got to book my flight to Israel. It's not going to be with Birthright because I'm over the age of 32, just barely, haha. But in any event, I really think the videos are just stunning and really show the beauty of Israel indeed. By the way, these people that come back, they become very Israel engaged. We're going to talk about that just in a sec. But do you have any idea, in fact, how many have made Aliyah as a result of Birthright?
Yeah. So listen, I think it's very important that we stress that we don't have any statistics on it. And people do come on Aliyah, I have no doubts about it. We've got lone soldiers, we've got people on Aliyah, there's full of them in Israel. But our aim, and I am very much in support of that, is that our aim is to get these participants, these young Jews, to come to Israel to learn about it and come back and become active in the Jewish community in the United States. Because at the end of the day, listen, I've lived many years in Israel as well. Later on, we'll talk about it and we've got time, but I've lived many years in Israel. But I appreciate and understand that from a strategic point of view, we have to ensure that we've got a very strong Jewish community in the United States that continues to support the state of Israel. We cannot stand on our own. There's no such thing. No country can stand on our own. No country can defend itself. We've got to take some certain very difficult and hard positions in order to defend Israel. And we need a superpower such as the United States to ensure that they back us. The only way you're going to do that is to ensure that you've got a vocal, strong Jewish community that supports Israel. So our aim is to take these young adults, and some of them, yes, will stay in Israel, will come in Aliyah, but the majority, we want them back here to become part of an active Jewish community and an active Jewish leadership. And I think that is the important part of it.
Listen, Izzy, on a bit of a lighter note, before we move on, I know there have been many marriages that have resulted from couples meeting on Birthright. Yeah. And I love the one example. It's featured in the TV show 90 Day Fiancé. It's of Lauren and Alexei. And I'm just wondering, do you ever get any wedding invitations yourself?
Listen, now and then I do. I must tell you, sometimes, they're all over America. So, from a point of view of being a non-profit organization, we want to try to ensure that we, are as frugal as we can. But yes, we get them, and there's plenty of them, by the way. I mean, the one, you saw the one that you already have seen, that has been very popular. But right. We had Stephanie and Gerard Galvan that went on the first trip in 2000. They met at the airport, something similar to what you've got, with the what's the name, with the Bravarnik,
right?
And they hung together all the time, got married, had 2 daughters. The daughter just had her bar mitzvah now, and they're just waiting to get her onto Birthright once she's at the right age. So there's plenty of cases like that. People fall in love, they sit together, they enjoy Israel. As we saw with Lauren, the fact that they spent time together in Israel also was just tremendous. By the way, she'd gone on as a participant, and then when they met, the 2 of them, Alexei and Lauren, they actually were manning a trip, but they spent a lot of time together. And their love for each other, I think, was also the fact that they had a love for Israel by then. And we all know how pro-Israel and pro-Judaism they are. And in today's environment, which we might need to talk for a few minutes, it's just unbelievable how they are prepared to hold the flag and run around with the Magen David Adom, being proud Jews without being concerned about the backlash.
Indeed. You're the ultimate shadchan, Izzy. Now listen.
You've got to be a bit careful. Let me just tell you this, because young people don't like the word shadchan, so you've got to be a little bit careful about that.
All right, that's just between us. I'll keep it in the conversation, but it's between us. So let's go there now in terms of what needs to be done today. I mean, given the environment of today. So apart from Birthright, given the world we're living in, you've really seen it all because you've been both on the Israeli side as well as the American side, the Australian side. We'll talk about your background in a sec. But what needs to be done today, Izzy?
Look, let me put it this way to you. To start off with, I think one of the most important lessons that we've learned from the conflict now with the Hamas recently and the anti-Israel, in general, anti-Judaism, anti-Semitism that is growing within America and in campuses, there's only one way that we're going to be able to ensure that our young Jews are getting the right information. And they are being canceled today. And in order for them to cancel others, is to point out the falsehood and the wrong information that are being today peddled all over the place. The biggest problem we got today is on the social media. And the social media, if you're a young Jewish adult that don't know very much about either Judaism or Israel, and you read your social media, TikToks or whatever you've got day in and day out, 90% of what you get there is anti-Israel and anti-Semitic. So now you're asking yourself, hold on for a second, if I'm getting 90% of it, where am I going to be picking up the truth? Not the young adults, but us as responsible leaders of the Jewish community. How do we ensure that these young Jewish adults are in effect getting the right story? So I always tell people, as I mentioned before, that when you go to Israel, your impression is completely different when you see it somewhere else. You can put on television and there is a little bit of a strife there and you think the whole of Israel is burning. It doesn't work like that. It's far from it. You have to make sure today that these young Jewish adults are taken to Israel. The only way they're going to learn what it's all about is to come along there, spend 10 days, spend 2 weeks, spend a month, spend 2 months, and see the beauty, the democracy, the high tech, everything that you can talk about a successful state, not the some of the states all over the world today that are, packing up. We have to get them there. Today, birthright is more important than ever before. And my call to the Jewish community is twofold. Make sure that we've got the necessary support to be able to take all of these young adults, and make sure, even more important, that you influence and encourage any Jewish young adults that you know that he should be going on a trip to Israel, because that's the only way that you're going to be able to counter some of the anti-Israel sentiment you see on campuses and everywhere else. And that's the only way that once they get to Israel, you're going to get them coming back and telling you, I'm a proud Jew. I'm not concerned about going with a Magen David Adom. I'm not scared about it. I'm not scared about my Judaism, and I'm not scared about telling people that I've been in Israel and that it's a fabulous state, and that what you're telling me and trying to cancel me, I'm going to cancel you back with the real facts that they are.
Well said, Izzy. And to what extent is there follow-up after the trip, if any, so that it's not just sort of a one and done experience?
So let me just tell you this. We are, I'm a great believer. I come from the business world.
Yeah.
And I'm a great believer that everyone have got their expertise. So that when I was in business, and I was working when I was very young at Philips, and we were doing TVs in those days. I don't know whether Philips TVs are any good nowadays, but we were doing Philips. We wouldn't go into other lines because we knew that we were very good for that in various other consumer goods specifically, right? Mm-hmm. We are very good in educational trips, and that's our expertise. When the young adults come back here, you've got a Jewish community that is enormous. They've got federations. You've got Friends of IDF. You've got Jewish National Fund. You've got full of them. They have to take the 750,000 young adults and keep them enthused and occupied and continue. If they want to go to one side, give me $500 million and I'll get you a tremendous Jewish organization. That, because that's what involved in something like that. You can't just do little bits and pieces. You got to make sure that you've got a Jewish organization that deals with it and take care of them, gives them plenty of opportunities to do. And so at the end of the day, I'm not trying to, pass the buck, but it sits with the established Jewish community. They've got to ensure that they move forward and take that challenge. And I'm telling you now, time is running out on them. And if they don't do it, unfortunately, in another couple of generations, we will not have a vibrant, strong Jewish community, even if we send them to Birthright. No. So, as I said again, we are very good at one thing, to run the activities and communities within the United States. There are others. If they will tell us in a couple of years, we are putting our hands up in the air, we can't do it anymore, we will muster all of the resources that we can, and we'll take over.
Right. You've planted the seed, is what you're saying. You plant,
By the way, our list of the names are being passed to federations and to many other Jewish organizations to follow up.
So there you go. So that's really the handoff.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, we do, let me just add something on, Steven. We developed an app. Our participants, when they come to Israel, they've got to put that app on the phone. And when they come back, we have every Jewish organization that are interested in being with us have got their activities on the app. So they can keep themselves engaged in seeing where they would like to go. There's a Shabbat dinner, up at the Upper East Side. Let me go there and see what it's all about. Have a look at it. Obviously, we developed it just before the pandemic, so that's been a very quiet, obviously, couple of years now, 18 months, and it might continue for another half a year. So as a result of that, we don't have too many applicants because they haven't started the journey. But as the journey now cranks up again and we're starting take off again, we do anticipate that a lot of people are going into that app because they have to. Our advantage is they have to download it, whether they like it or not.
Izzy, that's really significant to have that app because that's
Yes.
just like a one-stop shop of everything Jewish that's happening in their hometown or wherever they are.
Exactly. We're not advertising it too strongly for the moment, as I said to you, because of the COVID, and we know that it's lagging a little bit behind as a result of that. But we're hoping once things rev up again, hopefully this Delta virus will disappear and things will be so much more manageable, and we start again, really aggressively to get people across to Israel. Then we'll advertise it as well.
So how did Birthright pivot then during COVID when international travel stopped, and what's happening with the trips now as we record this?
Yeah. So basically what happened was this. First of all, we had to postpone 38,000 participants. It's just phenomenal when you think about it. By now, if you look at it, you're probably talking about 70,000 that never did a trip as a result of all of that. And remember what happened. Basically, the Israeli government only gave us the okay in April, and then you had the hostilities in May. So really, most of young adults for the summer had already committed themselves one way or another, but we're still doing nicely. We've got trips. Even in August now, we've got, probably about 25, buses, floating around there. So we're moving ahead slowly. What we're doing is basically when they come to Israel, they have to do their COVID test before they get on their plane. We go with a lull for the moment because we don't want any stopover. We don't want to take any risk. They come to Israel. We organized with Elal, they go to the Elal hangar at Ben Gurion Airport. We do a serological test. Within a couple of hours, we get the results back. And then we have them 20 in a bus instead of 40 before. Because again, we don't want to take the risk, even though we probably feel that 30 and 40 will be fine. As we go further on and we see that everything is fine, we will increase it to 30 and then go back to 40. We are careful in the sense that we take them with a lot of outside activities. So in other words, there are obviously certain changes that we are, taking into account. But, otherwise, I would say to you that overall, we have managed to do nicely with all of that. At the year of the pandemic itself, with the 38,000, we realized, listen, that there wasn't much that we can do. So basically what we did is we did virtual reunions, holiday learning Zoom sessions, photo contests, live alumni stories. We did all of that to ensure that we kept in touch with as many alumni as we could. And with the 38,000 expected participants, because we wanted to ensure that they were keen on then continuing that journey once everything opened up. So we did that. It was, very successful, and we continue with that. And also remember, one of the issues with taking almost 50,000 young adults every year is that you've got an infrastructure that needs to be maintained. We try to maintain the infrastructure as much as possible. Our donors last year were very generous and appreciated and understood the issue, so that at the end of the day, internally, we maintain the infrastructure. Externally, a lot of our trip organizers got rid of many of their workers. So we got them involved in the digital sphere as much as possible so that they could rehire some of the top employees, some of the most important, some of the key employees. And we've continued with that now, so that basically we have got the infrastructure in place. We have to strengthen it a bit. We have to continue with it. And we have to continue, especially now. There might be again a downturn, but we've got an infrastructure that we easily can rev up to get to that 45 to 50,000 young adults that's needed.
And so this year, 2021, how many have gone this summer?
We anticipate that overall for the year, I mean, this virus now again, is, held us back, but we think that we would have by the end of the year anywhere between 12 to 15,000 young adults, which is tremendous. I mean, really, when you think about it, it's a third of what we take in a normal year. And we started it in April, when normally you start in December to register. By March, you've registered everyone, so that if you're a young adult, you say to yourself the other way around, not the way you told us in May, that listen, I've already committed myself to work and holiday. You do the other way around. You already commit yourself to birthright. And then when you look at jobs and when you look at holiday, you do it around birthright. So we anticipate next year to double that figure, and the year after be back to, close to normal.
How fantastic.
Yeah.
Wishing everybody there much success, because that's just quite an undertaking. Listen, there's still so much more to talk about when it comes to birthright, but I really want to get onto you and your own Israel journey, Izzy. And I almost feel like we could have just a whole separate hour just on you and your remarkable career. I mean, I knew about it. And then when I started to do even more of a deep dive, my eyes popped out of my head, because you've actually done some really remarkable things. But for our listeners that might not be familiar with your background, take us back to the very beginning, because you're from Australia.
Yeah, that's right. So basically, when I say I'm from Australia, I'm really a wandering Jew. I was born in Israel, but I was a little kid. My father was a rabbi, and we ended up being sent out. Then I still think then it was Jewish agency to be a rabbi. My father was a rabbi in Sweden, in Stockholm. We were there for about 10 years. From there, we went to Australia. You might ask, wow, all the way to Australia. And my mother, we never realized when we went to Australia, couldn't take the cold weather. So my father said, okay, you know what, let's go now to a warm weather. So we ended up in Australia, and I loved it, by the way. I got there at my high school years, and I remember still wanting to ensure that I pass my matriculation. So I used to translate my English books into Swedish. And slowly but surely, I picked up my English, went to Melbourne, went to high school there, did very well, went to Melbourne University, did all of my studies, in commerce, business administration, and then started working in some of the large companies in Australia as well, Philips, as I mentioned, and, many others. And meanwhile, also got involved in the Jewish community there very actively, met my wife, who was also going to Melbourne University, Regina, who's did her law, arts, economics at Melbourne University as well, comes from Polish stocks, as I said, but from Warsaw, not she, her parents, obviously, And of course, they've got all of the history of, their whole family. Many of the family got wiped out in the Holocaust, the same as my father. My father got to Israel around 37, 38, everyone got wiped out. They got no family whatsoever left. And of course, my father always instilled on me the importance of Jewish continuity and the love for Israel. But I didn't want to become a rabbi. That's the last thing I would do after having a father who's a rabbi. And you're a little bit involved in the same synagogue as me, with the Jewish community. It's not simple. So anyhow, I went into business. We decided once we got married that our aim is to go to Israel. I mean, I see it as Aliyah because I was very young. Regina had never been to Israel, my dear wife there. And we took the steps, went to Israel with 2 little kids. The best thing that we ever did. We love Israel. We've been involved in Israel from the day that we got there. And I was involved in many, many businesses. I'm not getting into all the details, but I assume if anyone wants to, they can look at my Wikipedia and they can see what you were telling me. But I became the chairman of Bezek. I had a lot of very, important, function within Israel. And in 2011, I was approached by the finance minister, who said to me, listen, we need a good businessman to run Israel bonds because, we feel that it's going a little bit downhill. So would you consider it? And I was tying back and forth, with the idea because, all the kids and grandkids were there. And luckily, we taught them all the importance of Israel and not leaving Israel. But the 2 of us said, you know what? But if we're going to do something for the Jewish community in the world, let's go to the United States. It's a huge Jewish community, and let's help both Israel and the community there. So we came to Israel Bonds. You already mentioned, that I got that straightened out as a good business, and it is a good investment, and it's a 5-year term. And I was on my way back to Israel, and then I was approached by Birthright Israel Foundation, and I thought to myself, you know what? If there's anything my dad up there is looking down and saying to me, is it take that? And I can tell you today that the most satisfying job I've had in all my career, and it has been an enormous career, as you say, and I love every bit of it, and, all rounded, and I've been involved in everything. It's Birthright Israel Foundation, because every time I see a young Jewish adult, male or female, coming back and telling me how it was life-changing experience, and their enthusiasm and their love. And when I'm in Israel and I'm on a bus and I hear them talking after 2 days, I'm a proud Jew, and they look at everything with big eyes, and there's an absolute admiration of what they see there. And all of a sudden they realize that they're in the majority culture. They put on the TV and they see Purim, and they see Hanukkah, and they see Pesach. It's an enormously fulfilling experience. I must tell you, I'm so pleased that I did it, because to me, it's the most rewarding and joyous experience that I could have ever gone through in my life.
I can imagine. We're glad that you took it as well. Just one or two other points, though, Izzy. You made Aliyah in 1979.
Yep.
1979 Israel is a far different place than 2021 Israel. Did you think that Israel would have the trajectory that it had over these years?
I must tell you, in 1979, I did not believe that that would happen. I'd come to Israel, and I still remember we went to absorption place, Regina and me, because we felt that that's how we would meet a lot of people and experience what it's all about. And we were in Mevaseret Zion in Jerusalem, and you had all of the Americans, the English, the French. It was a real tremendous. We made a heck of a lot of friends from the Western countries. It was an absorption center there. But I still remember the story where my wife got in there in the afternoon. She wanted to have some hot water and shower, and she put on the tap, and there was no hot water. So she sent me down to the office to tell them, listen, there must be something wrong. So they said to her, oh, no, listen, lady, it doesn't work like that. It's not Australia. You've got to put the boiler on, wait for 2-3 hours, and then you'll have hot water. So in those days, and you have little mums and pops shop, you didn't have the big supermarkets, and it took 10 years, and you should have seen the change. Today, you walk into a supermarket in Israel, I don't know when you were last there, and you've got all of the goodies that you can think of. Some of them are probably better than what you see in America. Now, you also realize that at that particular time, after 10 years being in Israel, I said to myself, hang on, Izzy, you didn't just come here to work somewhere and do nothing in contributing to the state of Israel. So one day, with a bit of guts, I approached, the office of Bibi Netanyahu, and I said, listen, my name is so-and-so in business. I'd like to assist. It took me you had to be persistent. Eventually, I had a meeting with Bibi, and I told him, listen, I think that the Israeli economy is far too socialistic, and it's run today by the government or the unions, and we need to change it to a market economy. He said, Izzy, you're 100% right. That's what I believe too. Get together a group of economists. Again, it's not that I was in the government. I was, outside of it. And let's meet every 10 days, and let's work on where we want to take the Israeli economy to. So I am seeing myself as being one of the people that assisted Bibi Netanyahu and his government to get the Israeli economy from very much a Histadrut-run agricultural setup to a high-tech economy that you see today. There's plenty of other, don't get me wrong, there's plenty of other players in it too, but I had a part in it, and it was a tremendous satisfaction. Regina, my wife, who was a lawyer, joined the Israeli Justice Ministry and ended up being, some assistant to the Attorney General there, and was involved for many, many years in transborder criminal cases. She was running after all of the criminals all over the world from Israel. And she was also in the Hague Convention, where people would take kids and stash them away in some other countries. She was chasing them. And it might be worthwhile one of these days to interview her, because we got stories that you just wouldn't believe. It's just unbelievable. So we both felt that we've contributed a lot. And the fact that we are today here and our kids and grandkids are in Israel makes it a little bit hard, but we try to get back to Israel very often. Today, you've got Skype and everything else. And our kids are very supportive of us, that they do genuinely believe, because they are like us, they've all been to the army, all been involved in the Israeli society, and they strongly believe that it's our duty to help and assist the Jewish community outside of Israel to better understand, better love Israel. And so they're extremely supportive of us, of doing what we're doing.
Well, fantastic. Well, listen, Izzy Tapoohi, we're going to leave it right there. We want to thank you so much for joining us here on IsraelCast. I think this is going to be the first, so perhaps several times we'll have you on the program, because you're one of those people that there's no shortage of topics to talk about when Izzy Tapoohi is in the house. So once again, thanks so much for joining us, and we'll have info about Izzy and Birthright on the show notes page of our website, jnf.org/IsraelCast. And before we move on with some housekeeping, I would like to remind you that Jewish National Fund USA believes the time has come for us to reclaim the narrative, take ownership of the word Zionism, and show the world how beautiful, inclusive, and inspirational it really is. So do join Jewish National Fund USA's Conversations on Zionism, Reclaiming the Narrative. It's a year-long series which will educate, engage, and inspire on the true meaning of the word Zionism and reclaim its true meaning in all its glory. So do go to jnf.org/convos for more. Once again, jnf.org/convos for more on the campaign. And of course, we do release new episodes of IsraelCast every other Wednesday, as I always say. And just so you never miss an episode, subscribe to us wherever you get your podcasts. Simply search for IsraelCast. And don't forget to rate and review us to make it easier for more folks around the world to find us. Or you can always enjoy the show by visiting us at our website. Once again, it's jnf.org/IsraelCast. Now, it takes a whole Moshav to put IsraelCast together. And for that, we thank Vivian Grossman, Dara Shapiro, and Olivia Schendel. Our editors are Jay Rothman and James Casada from Mirrortone Studios, right here in the very heart of New York City. And the music that you hear at the top until the program is titled My Eden. It's by the very talented Rafi Malkiel from his album Water on the Tzaddik label. Now, IsraelCast is indeed powered by Jewish National Fund USA, your voice in Israel. For more information about JNF USA, visit jnf.org. And if you'd like to write to us with story ideas or just to say howdy, we'd all love to hear from you. Our email address is israelcast@jnf.org. Meantime, I'm Steven Shalowitz, thanking you for tuning in and looking forward to having you join us on future episodes of IsraelCast.